All right, guys, video to help you review for your test 14 tomorrow. Let's see what we got here. The first two, kind of the same kind of problem. Make sure you have your identity page ready. You're looking for what's called the double angle identities, where you got sine 2x, cosine 2x, tangent 2x, or 2 theta. And once you have those, it's pretty much straightforward. One thing you need to do on 1 and 2, you have to know sine and cosine both. So like on number 1, they told me sine was 5/13. You can draw a triangle if you need to. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. If you do Pythagorean theorem, you find out that side is 12, which means cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, which cosine theta then is going to be 12/13. Now you may just know that triangle is a 5, 12, 13. That's the best way to do it. And of course, 3, 4, 5 is the other real famous triangle. Now, this one says sine. First one says sine 2 theta. Also, it said quadrant 1. That's why this is positive 12/13. By the way, everything's positive in quadrant 1. So when it says find sine 2x or 2 theta, you just follow your identity page, which says 2 sine x cosine x. So I did 2 times sine x times cosine x right here. And when you do that, you just multiply it out, 120 over 169. And you get your sine and cosine from down here and also in the directions. Cosine 2x, you have 3 options. You can pick any of the 3 you want to. I picked the first one. I did cosine squared minus sine squared, and I just plugged it in. I squared my cosine, my 12/13. I squared my 5/13, subtracted them. I got 119 over 169. And to be honest with you, when it asks me for tangent 2x, I never actually work out the formula. Remember, tangent sine over cosine, so I always just put the sine, which is 120 over 169, over the cosine, which is 119 over 169. Those cancel, 120 over 119. 2 is the exact same kind of problem. Only difference is they give you a different triangle. They give you negative 4/5, and because it's quadrant 3, sine would be negative 3/5, because it's a 3, 4, 5. Sine 2x, same deal, 2 times sine times cosine. Multiplied out, got 24/25. Cosine 2x, I did cosine squared minus sine squared again. Subtract, I got 7/25. Tangent, again, all it is, I put the sine, which is 24/25, over the cosine. The 25, they'll always be the same because they come from the same triangle. So you get 24 over 7. Number 3, half angle. Find your half angle. What you got to do is you got to rewrite it. You got to double the angle. Even though it's called half angle, the first step you need to do is double the angle. So I wrote it like this. I wrote cosine of 135, which is 67.5 times 2 over 2. That becomes my x in my identity. So everywhere I see an x, I'm going to put the 135. Now, cosine 135, you can look at your unit circle if you need to. The value of 135 is negative square root of 2 over 2. So don't forget, you cannot leave a fraction inside a fraction. So I multiplied every term in that fraction by 2 and got to there. And then because I know what the square root of 4 is 2, I took the square root of the bottom, left the square root on the numerator, and you're good. Number 4. 4 says evaluate. Now this one says cosine x plus pi over 2. So on your identity page, I'm looking for identities that involve pi over 2. And I found one that, there's not a cosecant one, but also cosecant's reciprocal of sine. So I did the reciprocal here. I did 1 over sine of x plus pi over 2. When I look at my sheet, with my identities, it says sine of x plus pi over 2 equals just cosine x. So I just substituted right there and put cosine x on the bottom. 1 over cosine is secant, so that's where the secant x came from. Number 5, cotangent. There's also not a cotangent x minus pi over 2, so cotangent is cosine over sine. So we wrote it that way. We wrote cosine over sine. Looked at my paper again. Cosine x minus pi over 2 is sine x. Sine x minus 2 is negative cosine. Sine over cosine is tangent, and it's negative tangent because 1 was positive and 1 was negative. Number 6, this says simplify sine x plus cosine squared. Remember, when you square something, you use square, multiply, double square. So I squared the sine, multiply the 2 terms together and doubled it, which means I put a 2 in the front of it. Squared the cosine. Now here's what you got to remember: sine squared and cosine squared, that's on your sheet. Sine squared plus cosine squared is always 1. Plus 2 sine x cosine x. Now if you look for 2 sine x cosine x on your identity page, you will see that's really sine 2x. So my final answer, as simple as I can get it, is 1 plus 2x. Number 7, once you get to 7, you're doing equations like we did today. The first one, the most basic type of all, it's just asking you, where's cosine negative square root of 3 over 2? You can look at your unit circle and find the values. Remember, cosine is the x coordinate. X is negative square root of 3 over 2 at pi over 6 and 7 pi over 6. And don't forget your degrees. Same thing as 150 and 210. Number 8. Number 8, to solve this one, you got to do a couple things. You got to move the 1/4 to the other side first, which I did. Now, because it's sine squared, you need to take the square root of each side. And whenever you do that, don't forget to put your plus or minus sign. And if you take the square root of 1/4, the square root of 1 is 1. The square root of 4 is 2, so I got 1/2. And because it's plus or minus, I need all the 1/2s. I need every quadrant where sine is 1/2 or where y is 1/2. And that happens at all the power 6s. So I put all the power 6s. 1 power 6, 5 power 6, 7 power 6, 11 power 6. Change them all to degrees. All there is to it. Number 9. I got a factor. So what I did first on 9 is I moved the 1 to the other side, made it a +1. And I'm going to do this. I'm going to take the cosines out of it and put the x, just kind of substitute x for a minute so I can factor it. All right, I'm going to do slide, divide, slide over here on the right side. So I slide the 6 over, make it 6. I factor 6 with 3 and 2 because it adds up to be 5. And then you divide by the same 6. So I got 1/2 and 1/3. Slide the 2 and the 3, which I did. Put the 2 in the front and the 3 in the front. So I get this. I got those two factors over there, which means cosine is -1/2. You know, you can also tell that over here. And also cosine x is -1/3. Now this is where it gets a little crazy. So I'm looking for where's cosine -1/2 or where's x -1/2, which of these two? Happens at those two places. I forgot to put degrees here, but that would be, let's see, that'd be 120 degrees, and 4 pi over 3 would be 240 degrees. Now, this is not one, that's not even on your circle anywhere, but it is less than 1. It's in between -1 and +1, which means it does have an answer. So what I'm going to do is, I have to punch that in my calculator. I'm going to hit this way. I'm going to do second cosine, or inverse cosine, and do 1/3. And obviously I did degrees. Go ahead and do degree mode when you're doing that. And it gave me this answer. It gave me 109.5, which is exactly what it is. That's quadrant 2 because it's between 90 and 180. Cosine is also negative in quadrant 3. So what I did is I took the 109.5, and that is, I also subtracted it from 360 to get into my quadrant 3 right there. Okay, all there is to it. Or actually I did this. That's not what I did. That probably worked though. But what I did is I figured out how far a 109.5 was from the x-axis. It's 70.5 away. So I went 70.5 into quadrant 3, added it to the 180 in quadrant 3. I should draw here. So 180 is right here. When I punched this first part in my calculator, I got 109.5, which is, you know, it's about right there. That's about where 109.5 is. And the angle it makes right here is 70.5. And it's negative. I went there because it's negative. That's why it gave me the quadrant 2 answer. Well, cosine is also negative in quadrant 3. So I need the 70.5 down there. So I just added it to the 180 and got 250.5. Hope that's okay. Number 10. 2 sin x, cosine x. This is one like we did in class. You have to, anytime you have stuff in common, the first thing you do is factor it out. Both these terms have sine x, so I factored out the sine, which left me a 2 cosine on my first term. And just since that's a 1 sin x, that left me a 1 right there. So the factor outside, sine is 0, or cosine x is -1/2. That comes from that right there, -1/2. Sine is 0, where's y 0? Y is 0 at 0 and pi. Where's cosine -1/2 at these two places? I forgot my degrees again. That'd be 0 degrees, 180 degrees. Let's see, 120 degrees, and also 240 degrees. All right, number 11. 11 is actually easier than the last one, but it just has a sine in it, so I'm going to isolate the sine x function. So what I do first, I'm moving the square root of 2 over. That's what happened here. Give me negative square root of 2. I still have this 2 in the front, so I divide both sides by that 2. It gives me negative square root of 2 over 2, which looks so familiar to you. So I'm looking at my unit circle, or you should know these actually. That's going to be pi over 4s, and because it's negative, it's quadrant 3 and quadrant 4. That's what I found. 5 pi over 4 and 7 pi over 4. If you change those to degrees, you get 225 degrees and 315 degrees. And that's 11. All right, number 12, last one. You're going to have one like this tomorrow, and you're going to have either cosine 2x right here or sine 2x. What I need you to do on that one, what you need to do, is look at your identity page and substitute. These are not the same functions. You cannot subtract those two because one's 2x and one's 1x. So look at your identity page, and under cosine 2x, there's one of them that says this. One of them says 2 cosine squared x minus 1. And I chose that. At the same time, I'm going to pull this 1 over. And the reason I chose that is because I don't want my equation to have sines and cosines in it because that's really hard to solve. It's much easier if all you have are cosines or all you have is sines. So that's why I picked that one. And again, if you look at your identity page, you have 3 things to choose from there. First thing I notice is those ones are out of here. Tried to get it out of there. There we go. And now what that leaves me with is 2 cosine squared minus cosine x equals 0. Now what they have in common is they both have a cosine. So I'm going to take out a cosine. Be careful when you do this. What that leaves me with on my first term, it leaves me with a 2 and another cosine. If I take it out of here, that's really minus 1 cosine x. And if I take out the cosine, it leaves me with a minus 1 only. So my 2 answers are going to come from like cosine is 0 or cosine x is 1/2. And that 1/2 comes from putting the opposite of that 1 over the 2. That's what would make that parentheses 0 as 1/2. So where's cosine 0? Cosine of 0 pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. Where's cosine 1/2? Pi over 3 and 5 pi over 3. And if you do the degrees, you get 90 degrees, 270 degrees, 60 degrees, and 300 degrees. And there it is. Hope that helps. Rewind, watch as much as you need to of each one. Very similar to your test tomorrow. If you can do this, you should be in pretty good shape. Don't forget your 2 pages tomorrow you can use on your test, your identity page and your unit circle. Good luck. I'll see you tomorrow.